Hello and welcome to the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports, and we continue our position previews here at RealTime Fantasy Sports. We're up to the receiver spot. We're going to preview the receiver position for the coming season. Lots of good info in here, and I am going to be joined by my son Henry Paur once again to go over all these receivers. Also, don't forget to sign up for a league on RealTime Fantasy Sports. All different options, our Fantasy Life Championship, which is a $500,000 grand prize. We have our Real-Time Fantasy Sports Championship as well, our Best Ball Championships. You can sign up for commissioner product. You name it, we offer it here at Real-Time Fantasy Sports. Get in a league today. It's RTSports.com. All right, now we're going to preview this receiver position for the coming season. I'm going to bring up Henry to talk with you about all the receivers for the coming year. Henry, as always, appreciate you coming on with me.
Yeah, no problem. It's always a good time.
Henry, this receiver position, it's pretty loaded. A lot of good options this year. It should be a good one for fantasy teams, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. It feels like it's a really deeper class. Like there's a lot of guys people love and there's a lot of guys people hate. But we'll see how it goes. But I'm excited.
Exactly. And I'll just kick right into the preview here and kind of go along those same lines of thinking. And what do you think is the biggest receiver storyline heading into drafts this year?
I have second year breakouts. So there's a lot of guys that we're looking at that could have some big second years. I know the big one that's gotten the most hype probably in camp so far has been Luther Burden III. I mean, they've talked him up and down. The coaches, the GM, all the players. They keep saying how much of a dog he is and what he brings to the table and his mentality. There's a lot of other guys too, like Emeka Ibuka. Mike Evans is gone. He's looked to be the alpha number one in Tampa and a new offense under Zach Robinson. He could have a big year. I know Tet had a good year last year, but could he take a bigger second year leap in an offense where they just lost Chris Brazzell for the entire year? So he could carve out even a bigger role. There's also the guys in the Texans, Jalen Nolan, Jaden Higgins. If we could see if they provide a bigger role. We saw flashes last year from Higgins of what he can do. Could he bring a bigger leap in year two? Another guy I like is Trey Harris even. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen in that Chargers passing game. We know Lad McConkey is probably going to be heavily involved, but outside of that, you have Quentin Johnson maybe, but Mike McDaniel talked to Trey Harris yesterday about how much of a hard worker he is, and they said they're not going to sign any vet receivers to fill a role. So he may play a wide receiver or 3 role, or maybe even get bumped up because of injury. I think Trey Harris could be primed for a bigger year.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of good-looking second-year receivers this year. It's kind of a trend a lot with fantasy. You kind of have that post-rookie breakout, and I think that's a good call. My biggest storyline is actually I think receivers carry more risk than fantasy owners think. The popular move in recent years has been really to hammer the receiver position early because they feel it's safer than running back, fewer injuries, more predictable production, but the data doesn't really back that up, quite frankly. Over the last 3 years, receivers drafted in the first 5 rounds hit less often than running backs. So 32% compared to 41% for running backs. So receivers have hit less, and they've also busted more. So those numbers are 41% for receivers busted in the first 5 rounds compared to 28% for running backs. So if anything, the risk actually runs the other way for receivers. So I think it's a perception a lot of fantasy owners think. It's really safe to go receiver early, but they actually carry some risk. So I think this is where we're going to help fantasy owners with this preview is we're going to talk about some of these guys we think are kind of carry less risk than some of these other options, and they can help you win your drafts come fantasy day. All right, Henry, let's talk about the first category, or second category, I should say, is safest pick. Who do you think is the safest pick at that receiver spot?
I have Jackson Smith-Njigba. I just think he's just a really safe option. And we saw last year, I know it's a new offense. Clint Kubiak is gone, but the connection he has with Sam Darnold is unmatched. I mean, they just seem to have a connection on another level of what to do, improv, anything. I just think there's not much competition for him. I know they re-signed Rashid Shaheed and Cooper Kupp, but I don't think they're going to factor much into him being the alpha number one and getting a ton of looks. They're coming off a Super Bowl. They're going to want to repeat, and that's going to happen. They're going to have to keep going to JSN throughout the season.
So my safest pick, I think that's a good call. Mine's kind of similar. A guy who gets massive target share. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown. As I mentioned, just a huge target share in recent years. He has an elite catch rate too. He rarely drops the ball. consistent weekly four because of all those catches he gets. And the quarterback, Jared Goff, throws to him early and often with short and intermediate throws. He gets just so much work. I think he might have the best floor in fantasy at the fantasy receiver spot this year. He may not lead the league in yards, but I think he's rarely going to give you a bad week. He's going to get a ton of catches. He'll catch some touchdowns as well. I just think Amon-Ra St. Brown's as safe as it gets. All right, Henry, let's talk about a league-winning receiver. Who do you think is going to be a guy that's going to win fantasy leagues for owners this year?
I talked about him in the second-year breakouts, and that's Luther Burden. I just think that he's going to establish himself as the true number one in that offense that we know is going to be high-scoring, high-powered. I just think Rome Odunze's kind of been okay his first couple of years in the league. I mean, we've seen the injury at the foot. I mean, he's shown flashes, don't get me wrong, but Luther Burden just been talked up and down the board about his route trees improving, how he's after the catch, how he can be a deep threat, play the slot, everything. Ben Johnson has raved about him, which makes me lead to believe that he's going to have a huge role this year. I mean, he may play all over the place, go in motion. He may have the Amon-Ra St. Brown role in this offense where he can get a ton of looks, ton of targets, ton of catches, and with how good this offense is going to be, there's going to be a lot of scoring. I just think Burden's going to be a huge, huge player in fantasy this season.
My league-winning receiver is another second-year guy, and you mentioned him earlier as well. It's Emeka Egbuka. I think he's going to have a huge year. I got his jersey on right here, as you can see. I just think he got off to a great start last year as a rookie, but he kind of stumbled after week 5. He had just 2 games of double-digit fantasy points, but he was kind of banged up. So I think that played a big factor in it. Mike Evans is gone. He's going to be the number one, in my opinion, over Chris Godwin. I think he's going to get a ton of targets in that new Bucs offense. Also, Baker Mayfield, he's another guy that was banged up the second half of the season. I think that really impacted the passing game and Egbuka as well. So I think Egbuka is going to have just a monster season. He was 22nd overall in fantasy receiver scoring as a rookie, and he really stumbled down the stretch, as I mentioned. So I think his ceiling is super high. I expect him to have a breakout year, and I think he's going to be a great, great get for fantasy owners. They can get him as a number 2 in most instances, and I think he can end up being a number 1 by season's end. So I think Egbuka is going to be a huge, huge fantasy receiver this year. I'm really looking forward to getting a lot of stock of him throughout all my drafts. Let's talk about the opposite end of things now, Henry. Who do you think is going to be the biggest bust at receiver?
I have Christian Watson, and the main reason is I just don't know, like, the health. We have not seen a fully healthy season, really, from Christian Watson in his career. I believe I'm correct. I don't think he's eclipsed 1,000 yards in a season yet in his career, which is a pretty hard stat. And they also signed him to a big contract, which would be a little questionable. But Jaden Reed's going to be healthy this year. Matthew Golden is talked about, another guy that having a huge second-year breakout. Like, I just think there's going to be a lot of competition in his offense, and with his health concerns over his career so far, we don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy, that I don't see a world where he's going to finish where he's being drafted at right now.
So my biggest bust is A.J. Brown. Again, it comes to where he's being drafted as well. You have to use a super high pick to get him. Normally a second-round pick to get A.J. Brown. At this point, he heads to New England. They get their number 1 receivers for Drake May. They got a lot of mouths to feed in that offense, a lot of talented receivers, and Brown can become disgruntled when he's not getting the work. And if some of those receivers are taking some of the work from him, who knows what happens. Plus, his numbers have been down in recent years as well, so that's another concern for me. I think Brown's going to have some big games, but I think he's going to lack some consistency, and he's not going to be a true wide receiver number 1 for fantasy owners. So I think he has some concerns coming into this season, and I would just avoid him at this point, and I have no shares of him right now, quite frankly, and I think he's going to end up being a bust for fantasy owners with the price tag he currently has on his fantasy draft position. All right, Henry. Player you're higher on than a consensus. So somebody you might be taking earlier than others, or you have them ranked higher for whatever reason than others as well. Who fits that category for you?
I have Lad McConkey. I just think he's primed for a big year. Keenan Allen is gone. A new offense that's going to feature just high scoring, in my opinion. Mike McDaniel is known for being that high scoring offense type of guy. He's got a really elite quarterback now, and I think Lad McConkey's going to prove himself to be the true alpha number 1 in that offense. He's only got to compete with Trey Harris and Quentin Johnston. And then John Harbaugh came out yesterday and said, Jim, came out and said that he's going to not sign any more wide receivers. So this is the wide receiver core. Ladd McConkey is going to be the number one. And I just think with the price tag that he's at right now, I'd be happy to fire him up as a wide receiver 2 where he's being drafted.
My player I'm higher on the consensus is DJ Moore. He heads to Buffalo this year to be their number one receiver. I have him right now as my wide receiver 13. Remember, he has 96 plus receptions 2 of the last 3 seasons. Sure, he didn't have a great year last year. He had more to compete with in that Bears offense, though. He's going to clearly be the number one for Buffalo, has little to compete with in that offense, quite frankly, and I think he's going to get a ton of targets. We're already hearing good things about him forming a rapport with Josh Allen also. I think that's great news. Josh Allen really hasn't had a receiver like him in a long time, so I think this is great news for Moore. I think he's going to get peppered with targets on a weekly basis, and I think a lot of people think Moore is over the hill. Guess what? He's 29 years old. It's not that old for a receiver. I still think he has plenty left in the tank. I think he could push 100 receptions this year, push that 100 century mark at the reception mark for this coming season for DJ Moore. I think he's going to have a huge year. I'm really high on him for this coming season. I think it was a great landing spot for him in Buffalo. All right, opposite end of things. Player you're lower on than a consensus. Maybe not a guy who's going to be a complete bust, but somebody you're just not quite as high on than the consensus.
I have Garrett Wilson, and it's mainly because I just don't trust the Jets. I mean, I get Geno Smith's probably an upgrade at quarterback. He's going to be able to just throw the ball up in garbage time and stuff. But my issue is they added to that offense on the weapon side of things. And we never saw Garrett Wilson, I believe, play even a game with A.D. Mitchell last year. We saw him have some games down the stretch. And they added Omar Cooper Jr. and Kenyon Sadiq. There are some weapons there for him to compete with. I know they're 2 of them are rookies and one's a guy that was traded because they didn't think it'd be anything. But they're people to compete with that could be factors in this passing game. I mean, Garrett Wilson is going to get the looks. We know that. But I think there's going to be some weeks where he probably has some good weeks. There's going to be some weeks where he probably doesn't include even double-digit fantasy points. I just think it's a really risky price tag you're paying to get a guy on a team that's probably not going to be very good this year.
You didn't even mention Geno Smith. That could be another downgrade for him being his number one quarterback this coming year. Not good, right?
Yeah.
All right. My player I'm lower on the consensus is Mike Evans. So he's 32 years old, coming off an injury-plagued season for really the first time in his career. Those are 2 big concerns for me. He also averaged a career-worst 12.3 yards per reception last year, which showed signs of slowing down as well. I just don't expect him to match the production that he has had in past seasons with the Bucs. I know he's on the 49ers, a good offense. He's going to be the number one receiver most likely, but he's trending the wrong way right now at this stage of his career. I think his touchdown production has really carried his fantasy value in recent years, and that was one of his least stable stats last year. So I think it's just kind of a concern, or one of his least stable stats from year to year in past seasons, I should say. So I think Evans carries some red flags for this coming season. I'm just not very high on him. I know some people really like him. They think a new fresh start in San Francisco is going to be great for Evans, but I'm not sold. I have very few shares of him as well. All right, Henry, let's talk about mid-round targets. I think a lot of people think some of these drafts can be won in the mid-rounds, and there's some good options there at the receiver spot. Who's one of those mid-round receivers that you're targeting this coming season?
Mine's Carnell Tate, and it's kind of the rapport that we're getting from camp that him and Cam Ward seem to have a really good connection already. And it seems like the Brian Dable offense is already having a big effect on this Titans team. And we saw what Malik Neighbors did his rookie year in this Brian Dable offense playing the outside. He was a huge, huge play in fantasy. He had some huge games, and he was a great pick later in fantasy drafts. And I just think it might be the same exact thing with Carnell Tate here. I know Wan'Dale Robinson in the slot, but that was the same thing that happened with Malik Neighbors when he was there and had his big year. I just think they're going to be down, I think, in a decent amount of games. I do think there'll be a better team. That they're going to be throwing the ball. Cam Ward loves to air it out a lot. And Carnell Tate's going to be that deep threat down the field. I just think he could have a huge year and it's great value right now.
So my mid-round target is off that Chargers team you were talking about earlier, and it's Quentin Johnston of the Chargers. His ADP is 114 right now. I really like him. I think he's going to have a big year, a breakout year, his best to date. New offense, Mike McDaniel's running the show now. No Keenan Allen, that's another huge plus. He was 33rd in the receiver scoring last year as well, with Allen taking a lot of those targets that could have gone to Johnston. So Allen's gone. I think he's the best big play threat in this offense as well, and a top red zone target for the Chargers. I think he takes his game to a new level and could end up being a really good wide receiver 3 for fantasy teams this year. So Quentin Johnston's one of those guys I'm trying to target in the mid rounds. All right, Henry, let's do a couple rapid fire. I'm going to give you two players with similar ADPs, two receivers with similar ADPs. You tell me who you are leaning towards out of those guys. We'll go with these, some quick hitters. First one, T. Higgins or Lad McConkey.
I'm going to go Lad McConkey for the reasons I mentioned earlier. I mean, he's just going to be the true alpha number one. Higgins is going to be probably pretty solid, but you also have to think about he misses some games, it feels like, every year of some sort of injury. And he's also the wide receiver, too. I know he's on a high-powered offense, but he's still shadowed by Jamar Chase in that offense. Lad's going to be the true number one, play the slot, play all over. I mean, I just think he's great value, and I'd rather have him more T. Higgins at this point.
I like both these guys this coming year. I have shares of both of them, but I'm going to lean Higgins. I'm going to disagree with you, give Higgins a slight edge. You mentioned it, though. Injury is always a concern, but his ceiling is huge, in my opinion. I think it's higher than McConkey. Double-digit scores each of his last two seasons while failing to play a full year each of those years. So if he can get a full year in, those touchdown numbers could go up even more. So I give Higgins a slight edge over McConkey. Both guys, I think, are good players for this coming year. All right, next one, Henry. Chris Olave or Nico Collins? Both of them going about the second, third round. Who are you targeting out of those two?
I'm going Chris Olave. We just saw a big extension sign, which is good news for him. Good for him. But I think Tyler Shough is going to take a second-year leap in that offense. They added so many playmakers around him. They drafted Jordan Tyson, which I know that's targets to compete with Olave, but there's not much outside of that. Travis Etienne to open up the run game even. So I think it could open up more for Olave. We saw how big of a year he had. We saw the weeks he put up with Shough, and Shough didn't even play the entire season. Like, I think it could be a huge year for Olave, even if Tyson there, that they're going to probably score more on offense. They're going to be better overall. Second year in the system. I just think it could be a big year for Olave in that entire Saints offense.
I agree with you. I'm going with Olave here as well. I think I could have put this in my higher than consensus category too. Olave, I feel like I'm higher on him the most, but I think he's just going to have another really good year. He had his first 100-yard reception season last year as a pro. Emerging offense, like you mentioned. Tyler Shough is going to take a step forward in year two also. And Nico Collins, he has injury concerns, kind of like T. Higgins, struggles to stay healthy throughout the season. And I think the Saints offense, I give them an edge over Houston as well. So that's another reason I like Olave. I think he'll get more catches also. I think he's just a really safe receiver. I know he has injury concerns with the concussion stuff, but he seemed to get over that last year, which was really encouraging. And he didn't have any issues with the concussions last year. So hopefully that is a trend going forward for Olave, because when he's healthy and on the field, he is a absolute monster, in my opinion. All right, Henry, next one. I think these guys are really similar type players, guys who have kind of underachieved, at least last year, both of them did, and they're kind of both at the same stages of their career. I think it's kind of make or break seasons for both of them. It's Brian Thomas or Marvin Harrison Jr. Who do you like out of those two?
I'm going to go Brian Thomas Jr. Now, I do like Marvin Harrison Jr. I do like him. I just worry about the offense in general. Brian Thomas Jr. is in an offense that's probably going to be really good this year again. They have all their weapons back. Bryce Shaw tuned to know the running back now. But Trevor Lawrence had a sneaky, really, really good year last year that people seem to forget that happened. And now they're all these reports that him and Brian Thomas have this huge connection again, like they did in year one with Brian Thomas. I just think Brian Thomas is going to hopefully get back to his rookie year form. I know some people say he even looks better than his rookie year form right now in camp, but it's just camp, so you don't know what's really happening, or if it's just all talk. But I think Brian Thomas is primed for a year three breakout finally.
I agree. I'm going with Brian Thomas here as well. I think I just trust him more than Marvin Harrison. I'm not a Marvin Harrison believer. I think there's still a few of those out there, but I'm not one of them. And Thomas was really plagued by consistency and drops. So if he can rebound, if he can shore those up a little bit, I think he can rebound in a big way. An emerging offense. Jaguars' offense looked much better last year with Liam Cohen at the helm, and I think Thomas is going to take a step forward this year. Parker Washington's there too. I really like him in that Jacksonville offense, but I think Thomas is going to end up emerging and finished higher than Parker Washington in fantasy scoring. So I like Thomas a lot for the coming season. All right, last one. Another two players I think are kind of similar in age and ability, and that's Terry McLaurin or Jalen Waddle. Who do you got there?
I'm going to go Jalen Waddle just because I'm a little worried about Washington in general. They have two 32-year-old receivers, I believe. I think actually Diggs is 33 and McLaurin's 31, actually. But I just don't trust Washington a ton. There's so many injuries that I feel like have happened last year was so injury plagued for everyone on that offense. I'm a little worried to go into that. But for the Broncos, Jalen Waddle is going to be the number one. I know Sutton's there, but he may play the Joker role in this offense. They like to say in Sean McVay's offense, where he's going to go in motion all the time, play slap, play outside, do all sorts of things, screens, all this stuff. I just think he could have a huge year in a new offense finally, where he's the true alpha. I know last year he was in Miami, but that was because Tyreek Hill got injured and he had Tua as his quarterback. But now he has Bo Nix, a really good head coach, in a role where he can do all sorts of things. I'm just really excited to see what Jalen Waddle is going to be in Denver this season.
I actually like Terry McLaurin over Waddle. I think the recent signing of Stephon Diggs is actually a positive for McLaurin. I think it could help him take the top off defenses. McLaurin's a really good deep threat, and I think Stephon Diggs could open up things underneath for him. And a healthy Jaden Daniels is going to be a really big help for McLaurin as well. As long as he can stay on the field, I think his numbers can really improve. Remember, he had 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons before last year, so I give McLaurin the edge here. I think he's a little bit undervalued right now. All right, Henry, last category we'll hit before we get out of here. Bold prediction. What do you got?
I have Josh Downs finishing as a top 20 fantasy wide receiver.
There you go.
I just think he could be in for a big year. Michael Pittman's gone, so he's probably going to play the slot. And we heard from the coach the other day that he's going to play all over. They said he's going to play in the slot, and he's going to play some outside a lot too. So I'm just excited to see what Downs could bring to this offense. We saw flashes last year where he put up like 8 catches in a game for like 70 yards or something. But the issue was I don't think he scored a lot last year, which I think this year with now Pittman gone, there's going to be a lot more opportunities for him to score and play the slot. And there's going to be so many more opportunities for him to play that I think he's going to finally show what the type of receiver he is and have a huge breakout this season.
I feel like we've mentioned this guy a lot, but I'm buying the hype too. I'm going to say Luther Burden is a top 10 fantasy receiver this year. He didn't get a lot of playing time the first half of his rookie year, but he really emerged late in the season. A huge part of that offense down the stretch. He had double-digit fantasy points 3 of his last 4 games, and he was targeted 14 times in the Bears' 2 playoff games. We're hearing all sorts of hype on him in camp, being the clear number 1 receiver for Chicago, forming a great rapport with Caleb Williams. I love this offense. I think they're going to score a ton. I think Burden can be the Amon-Ra St. Brown for Ben Johnson in this Bears offense. So I'm buying the Burden hype as well. I think he's going to be a top 10 fantasy receiver this coming season. All right, Henry, thanks so much for coming on, joining me on the show. Great stuff. One more position left. We have tight end. We're not going to do defenses and kickers. I hate to say it. I know everybody loves defenses and kickers, but we're going to skip that one. I hate to say. One more position. You ready for the tight end one coming day? All right. Thanks everybody out there for watching another edition of the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show. Really appreciate it. Get in the league at RealTime Fantasy Sports. Go to RTSports.com. Have a great day, everyone.